Malaysia's leadership crisis deepens. Muhyiddin Yassin resigns as Prime Minister, and there's no clear successor in sight. For more, we're joined by Dr. Francis Hutchinson from the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Dr. Hutchinson, the ball once again in the King's Court here.
Indeed. And this is, I think, something that perhaps Malaysia is not so used to anymore. When we go back in time, during the post-independence period, and you had you had parliamentary leaders with very large majorities, the role of the king was relatively circumscribed and it was relatively ceremonial. But now in a situation where you have very narrow majorities, then the power and the authority of the king is much more expansive than it used to be in the past.
So the search then for a new prime minister, it comes down to a numbers game. How do you sort of see this sort of rectifying itself, if you like? It used to be, as you mentioned, a majority, but now, one or two votes here or there and the sands can shift.
Certainly. So it is certainly a numbers game in large extent. And why do I say that? Is if we go to the Constitution and we look at the role of the king, he must appoint a person that in his opinion commands the majority in Parliament. Now, at this point in time, this is subjective. And the best way to measure this, of course, is in Parliament. But as we've discussed, there isn't a clear parliamentary majority. So at some point, the king is going to have to make a call as to who he thinks this person is. Now, this person does not have to have 111 or 112 right away. There will be a period of time for him to canvass and get support. He may decide to go for a motion of confidence, which would really boost him and make him the uncontested leader of the country. Or regardless, when the parliament comes to debate the budget in October, this needs to be passed. So this can be taken as a de facto confidence vote. And of course, any government needs money to work. Consequently, this needs to be passed. So this will be operating. The other thing is, of course, that, as I've just mentioned, the Agong or the king now has a much greater, shall we say, power and authority, and he needs to use this judiciously. So he is going to want to appoint someone that he knows that can maintain a majority and will not lose it in a matter of weeks, and will, of course, be able to implement the policies that the country needs at this point in time.
Well, you would have seen some of the names bandied about in the wake of Muhyiddin Yassin's resignation. Who would you say the front runners are, though?
So, of course, one name that sort of comes back from the past is Tengku Razali Hamzah. This is a very senior politician that's been an MP since 1974. He was Minister of Finance, he was Minister of Trade and Industry, and he also has royal connections. On the, shall we say, negative side, he is a little bit, shall we say, elderly, not so sort of in the forefront, in the limelight, and also in internal party elections in UMNO, he came third for the presidential position. He also doesn't have a high-level position in the party at this point in time. By this, I mean he's not president or deputy president or vice president. So this is one thing. The other thing is, who is he going to bring to work with him? So are the court cluster, the sort of old guard of UMNO, going to accept his position, his candidacy? Have they picked him or not? Did he come forward by himself? Also, how can he reach out to Bersatu and the other coalition members? He has, of course, a very historic relationship with Mahathir Mohamad, but if Mahathir comes on, most likely then he will not be able to work with some of the older figures in UMNO, because Mahathir has said that he's not willing to work with them. Another contender is the former deputy prime minister, up until very recently, Ismail Sabri. He has a high position in the UMNO party hierarchy. He is vice president, and he has actually been able to establish very good working relations with other people in the Perikatan Nasional administration, notably high-level people in Bersatu. So perhaps having him as well as a senior Bersatu figure could be quite an attractive proposition from a numbers perspective, because then you can work with the numbers that Muhyiddin Yassin had, up until recently, about 100 people. And then you can try and attract some of the people that have left that have left Perikatan Nasional from UMNO, this group of 15 MPs, and bring them back. And then you're much closer to this majority position. That said, again, when we come back to some of the old guard in UMNO, they are a little bit unhappy that he put himself forward rather than going through internal party decision-making mechanisms. But certainly he's another candidate from the Perikatan Nasional side.
Dr. Hutchinson, thank you for sharing your perspectives with us this evening. We've been speaking there to Dr. Francis Hutchinson of the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute.